afternoon. Welcome to TNC Radio.live. This is the Truckers Network Radio Show. And now here's your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNC Radio.live, where we offer the news, information, traffic, weather, sports, and entertainment our commercial drivers want and need. Federal regulations are rampant in the trucking industry, and owner-operators and others are talking about all kinds of different rules that seem to pop up without warning. Heated debate continues about speed limiters, emission standards, the bans on diesel trucks with a push for EVs in places like California, inadequate truck parking, split speed limits, and the supply chain. All of this makes trucking absolutely chaotic. The U.S. House Transportation Committee just advanced some trucking policy bills, which include the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act. We wanted to know more about that as well as other issues, so we invited Jay Grimes, the head of regulatory affairs of OOIDA, back on the show to give us some updates. Welcome back, Jay.
Hey, good to be back with you guys.
It's always great talking to you. You're such a wealth of information. And, it does seem like regulators and politicians are more clueless than ever about trucking. They keep coming up with more ideas that make it so difficult. What's top of mind for you today? And is there some good news on the horizon?
Well, I think as you mentioned in the opening there's quite a few issues related to the trucking industry that Washington, D.C., Congress, and the Department of Transportation and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration continue to work on. Some of those issues, I think we need some more support, but on some of the issues such as speed limiters, we don't want the government going anywhere near some of the mandates that they're thinking and considering about proposing. And just within the last couple of weeks, it really has been busy here in Washington. We had a supply chain hearing a couple of weeks ago with the U.S. House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and then earlier this week, that committee held a markup on various trucking related legislation and some other bills as well, kind of continuing the legislative process, which can be a long and difficult road to navigate. And in some ways that's a positive, and in some ways it's a negative. But we can start it off with some positive news for the show today.
Okay.
So yes, yesterday, the U.S. House Transportation Infrastructure Committee advanced the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, and that's bill number HR 2367. And this is an effort that we've been working on for quite a few years here at OOIDA. And the bill is designed to increase truck parking capacity. We all know too well about the truck parking crisis. It's really nationwide in every region, every state across the country. That really makes it difficult and time-consuming for drivers to find safe and reliable places to park at the end of their day. And that really not only creates a safety issue, but also an efficiency issue for drivers who, DOT studies have said 56 minutes on average looking for an available parking spot. And
wow.
Other studies have shown there's only one spot available for every 11 trucks on the road. And we think we're overdue to have some dedicated federal funding to go to some of these states to improve that problem. That's what this legislation does, about $755 million over a 3-year period to make sure that the federal government and the funding that they're allocating to the states is going to increase truck parking spaces. A lot of the time on some of the funding that's going toward truck parking, it's going toward signage or technology aspects of truck parking, not actually building new spaces and making it easier to find spots. And
Wow.
that's what this bill is designed to do. That's what we've put in this bill to make sure that it does. And Now, this is one step in the legislative process, but this is a bill that's rare these days. It has bipartisan support. It passed the committee yesterday by a vote of 6-0 to 4. So has support from both sides of the aisle. We think it's a common sense bill. It's a legislation that's been introduced over the past couple of years, reintroduced this year, just at the end of March. So it is moving quickly through the legislative process this time around. And now we're going to turn our attention over to the Senate side, where there's been similar legislation introduced as well. So the wheels of government are moving on this truck parking legislation, which it is overdue and much needed.
That's excellent. And it's good to hear that it's bipartisan. So there's some common sense on both sides, and maybe they're starting to understand what truckers need.
Yes, and this has really been years, if not decades, long effort, and really do want to thank all the drivers out there who have made their voices heard on this issue, whether it's reaching out to their local representatives or calling their congressman and senator. We've really seen momentum and support for this legislation build over the past few years, and as we know, this problem isn't getting any better from the drivers that we represent and the drivers that we hear from. So we need Congress and DOT to get some of this money to actually build new spaces, convert shut down rest areas, shut down way stations into parking facilities. And the fine print in this bill is really make sure that the states and localities can do that. And we think it removes a lot of the obstacles, encourages states to find areas where they can put parking and put some of this money to good use.
So the states are going to be more cooperative because some are not.
Yes, and that's one of the problems that we've seen historically. And we did hear at the markup yesterday, there's programs out there right now from DOT that states can apply for to get money for truck parking projects. As you kind of alluded to, the problem is states they want to use money for other things. They don't necessarily view it as a priority. And that's the reason you see along some of these major highways and corridors that a lot of trucks are forced to park on highway shoulders. And that creates unsafe scenarios. And again, you've got drivers using too much of their time looking for parking instead of being able to make their deliveries and use their time more efficiently. So this bill is more of a dedicated funding. States, they've got to use this money for truck parking. They can't prioritize other highway related projects. And that seems to be the motivation that's lacking right now. This doesn't give states choice. They have to use it to not only for truck parking, but to actually either build new spaces or convert other land into truck parking spaces. So really addressing the capacity shortage there on the truck parking net.
Excellent. So there's accountability in the bill. This is good.
Yeah, without question. And, again, we hear from drivers, when we see a lot of the funding the last few years going to more technology purposes, where there are these signs that say how many available spaces are going to be out of a truck stop or a rest area, and it says 10 spots, but then when the driver actually gets there, those spots are gone. And haven't seen those purposes aren't really having the desired effect that we know is necessary. So with that one spot for every 11 trucks on the road, we've got to build more spaces. This legislation makes sure that new spaces are going to be built.
Yeah. One for every 11. That's just, it's amazing it took them this long to realize that's not a good percentage.
Yeah, and it is really mind-blowing to think about that. We've had some legislation, Jason's Law, really uh, going back about more than 10 years ago, that really opened up a lot of lawmakers' eyes to the
Yeah.
need for better truck parking. And now this is kind of the next step on top of that to make sure we can start building new spaces.
Well, I would say it's a lot of the hard work your organization does that's kept them their nose to the grindstone to do something and write something that makes sense that's going to actually help the trucking industry.
Well, yes, but we're really representing the more than 150,000 members and drivers out there on the road who are calling us every day. And when you
Sure.
look at the driver surveys that are done not only by our association but other trucking groups out there, truck parking. When you talk to their drivers, it comes up. If it's not at the top of the list, it's not too far behind. So
Yep.
this is something needs to be done across the board. It's unfortunate that it's taken so many years to get to this point, and we're not at the finish line yet. This is just the House Transportation Committee advancing it. We still need the House to pass it, and then also over on the Senate side as well. So a positive step, but still a lot more work to do.
Sure. So drivers still need to keep tooting their horn.
No
No pun
question about it.
intended.
Yeah.
Yep. Let their lawmakers know, vote for this, vote for this.
Yep,
Mhm.
exactly. So HR 2367 has advanced in the U.S. House. Call your congressman, call your congresswoman to support HR 2367. On the Senate side, it's S1034, S1034, the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act.
Excellent. We do have to go to break here, Jay. I know I want to talk more. I know that Tom has some questions for you too. All kinds of stuff going on in terms of regulations for the trucking industry. We're talking with Jay Grimes. He's the head of regulatory affairs at OOIDA, learning more about what's new in trucking regulations. We started out with some good news, so that's encouraging. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCradio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up. The Truckers Network helps professional drivers save money and makes their lives easier. We were created for drivers by a commercial driver. We know the industry and driver needs. A Truckers Network membership offers exclusive discounts through our trusted partners on things like truck care, truck parking, tires, oil changes, fuel additives, fitness, roadside assistance, first aid kits, driver training, and a whole lot more. Start saving today. Check us out at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. That's app.thetruckersnetwork.net. The trucking industry keeps America running thanks to the 3.36 million professional truck drivers who deliver everyday goods to 80% of American communities who rely on trucking for that last mile. The industry represents a diverse group with nearly half of drivers at 42% as minorities. Trucking Moves America Forward, or TMAF, educates the public on the essentiality of trucking by telling the story of trucking and its positive impact on our economy, communities, and lives. Learn how you can join the industry movement by visiting truckingmovesamerica.com. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and we're talking with Jay Grimes, the head of regulatory affairs at OOIDA, about what's new and what's going on in trucking. Tom, you said you had a question for Jay.
Yeah. Hey, Jay, thanks for being with us today. You been doing all right?
Doing well here, Tom. Great to be with you.
Yeah, I guess you're not bored these days.
That's for sure.
Let's talk for a moment about, because I think this particular position has an incredible impact and will have an incredible impact on the world of the drivers out there. Julie Sue's bid to become the Secretary of Labor continues to be stalled.
Yep.
What are you hearing, and what do you think the outcome's going to be there?
Yeah, you refreshed my memory on this one during the break because, as you mentioned, I think it's been a little more than a month, or just about a month, since she appeared before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. And just kind of a little bit of background on this kind of nomination process. Earlier this year, the prior Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh announced he was leaving the administration. President Biden then nominated Julie Su, who was the deputy secretary. And that really raised our eyebrows, because when you look into her past her past experience, and she was with the California state government, and one of the was really the lead official in kind of coming up with this AB5 proposal, getting that legislation through California, and implementing it. And we don't have to go over all the details and all the problems that's created with independent contractors and employees for truckers in California, but it's really, to put it mildly, a huge mess. And there's a lot of issues there. And we came right out after her nomination and opposed her appointment to this position, given her background, and really our concerns that she would try and make AB5, implement that at the federal level. We don't think that's a good idea at all for the trucking industry, or for independent owner operators, any way you look at it. And so we've been pretty vocal in our opposition. And she appeared before the Senate Health and the Senate Committee about a month ago. The Senate Committee did advance her nomination, but since that time, it has kind of been up in the air, and the full Senate has to confirm her appointment before she can enter into that role, and it takes a majority vote, and it's kind of a tight margin in the Senate, and there's a few different, a handful of Democrats in the Senate who are kind of, I think, have some concerns about her appointment as well. So that's kind of created a stalemate of sorts, and it's still kind of up in the air onto whether she's going to get to that floor vote and have enough votes to be confirmed as Secretary of Labor. And we've made our case to some of these senators, whether it's Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, John Tester in Montana, Kirsten Sinema, Arizona, and there's a couple of others that are kind of still on the fence, kind of given her background and her experience when it comes to independent contractors, and her stance on some of these labor issues that are going to have a real widespread effect on the trucking industry.
Well, yeah, and you've got a couple of Democratic senators that are MIA right now for health reasons. So all that, how long can she just be, whatever state she's in right now? I guess
Yeah, so it's kind of there's no real hard and set limitation here, as far as I know. There's some, so there's some limitations on how long she can be appointed as acting secretary, which is the role she's in right now. And then I think you're going to start to see some pressure build, and as it's as much of a policy issue as it is for basically any labor issue. It's also a political issue when it comes to the administration. They want someone in the position that can help move things along, to carry out some of the things they want to see achieved. And if you don't have a person in that position who doesn't have enough Senate support to be appointed, that creates a big vacuum. So I think the next few weeks are going to be critical. If she can't win over some of these senators that are on the fence, you usually end up, the person withdraws themselves from the nomination, and then the president would look to alternative candidate to kind of restart the nomination process. So it's kind of a guessing game on how this is all going to turn out.
Yeah. Based on what I know about her, she's not going to pull her name.
Yeah. Well, if some of these senators start coming out more publicly and say they're not going to vote for, that's going to change the math a little bit. And if it's apparent that she doesn't have the votes. I think she'll get some pressure. And
Yeah.
from what we've seen since she was, it was her advancement on the Senate Labor Committee was never in question. She was always going to have the votes to advance out of committee. But now, she doesn't seem to have picked up any momentum over the last few weeks. I don't think any of the senators that were on the fence before have come out in support for her. So the longer this kind of continues to stall and linger about, I don't think it's not a good sign for her chances. But a lot of this stuff can be oftentimes unpredictable. But again, the longer time you don't have a person appointed as Secretary of Labor, that's not a great look for the administration
Right.
who's in control. So we'll kind of still wait and see how this is all going to shake out. But we maintain our opposition to her nomination and are making sure that all the senators who really do have an influential role in this process are aware of our concerns and why she is not a good choice to lead the department.
Sure. Of all the stuff that moved out of the committee yesterday, is there anything there that that you look at as either a huge question or on the positive side, a slam dunk? Yeah, that'll go through no problem now.
There were a couple bills that we voiced opposition on that the committee did end up advancing, specifically on truck size and weight issues. And, from our position representing small businesses, we feel that increasing the federal size and weight limit regulations is not good for a couple of reasons. When you look at the highway safety impacts, bigger trucks on the road is going to lead to more deteriorating infrastructure. We know the state of our current infrastructure. Adding longer, heavier trucks is not going to help that. The cost for small businesses to kind of try and match the equipment investment is tough as well. So there were a couple of bills yesterday, one to approve a pilot program that would allow 6-axle trucks and heavier trucks on the roads that advanced. We had some opposition on. We'll kind of see where that goes. Those advanced much closer votes. The pilot program was 33 to 27. So our truck parking bill, if it gets to the floor, it's going to have bipartisan support. The other bills are a little more narrower, and kind of wait and see how those play out.
Excellent.
So it's kind of a wait and see.
Yeah,
like we always do on Capitol Hill.
That's right. Yes. And again, I'm not sure that the truck size and weight bills, have a lot of concerns from some other groups as well. I know the railroads, this is a big issue for them, and have not seen such widespread support for those issues as we have seen on truck parking.
Well, we're going to be going into a holiday weekend, so Congress will get a recess and maybe they'll play better together afterwards. So it'll be a faster and better outcome. I mean, kids always do better after having cookies and milk and stuff like that. So,
well, I don't want to bring up some of the debt stealing stuff that's going on right now. That's a whole nother ball of wax. And
sure.
We'll see how that unfolds over.
And of course, in those closed room discussions,
Yeah.
you wonder sometimes if, some of these other things get thrown in. I could put up with that if perhaps, you were a little more agreeable on, who the Department of Labor Secretary is going to be, or, that kind of stuff, it gets thrown in there. People say, no, they're separate. No, everything in that room.
Yeah.
Fair game.
For better or worse, in some of these major deals and negotiations, anything and everything can be on the table sometimes.
That's right.
And you just, except for those, really powerful officials that are in those rooms behind closed doors and working out the details, you never know how it's going to turn out.
Never.
So true. We have to go to break here, Jay. There's so much more to unpack, but we've covered quite a bit already. We're talking with Jay Grimes. He's the head of regulatory affairs at OOIDA. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up. TNCradio.live is proud to carry the Steve Summers Overnight Drive Show. TNCradio.live is dedicated to commercial drivers. We offer the news, traffic, and weather you need, and the entertainment, sports, talk, music, and celebrity interviews you want to hear 24/7. We have original shows and trucker podcasts that feature some of your favorites, like Ice Road Alex Debogorski and America's Truckin' Sweetheart Marcia Campbell. TNCradio.live is convenient and designed for professional drivers. The best part is we're free, and you can listen anywhere you are on the road. With just one tap, you can tune into Steve Summers and us right on your phone. Simply download our app by going to app.tncradio.live. That's app.tncradio.live. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and we're talking with Jay Grimes. He's the head of regulatory affairs at OOIDA. We've been talking about what's going on in trucking and trucking regulations. Jay, what's happening in the area of speed limiters? Is there any chance that proposition can finally go away? That'd be really nice.
Yeah, that's what we're pushing for, and we thought it had went away. Back in 2016, FMCSA and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration put out a proposal to mandate speed limiter devices. Obviously, we voiced our concerns. Tens of thousands of drivers voiced their concerns, and that proposal kind of stalled and never went anywhere for about 6 years. And then somewhat out of the blue, FMCSA, I don't know where they were digging around or found the old regulations that they wanted to reopen, but they put out a supplemental advance notice of proposed rulemaking to kind of reopen the mandate. And over last summer, we opposed it once again. I think the FMCSA proposal received over 15,000 comments, the vast majority in opposition. And when you hear FMCSA kind of talk, it does seem like they want to push this mandate forward through the rulemaking process. And on the regulatory side, they're still in the process of reviewing all the public comments they got last year. But we're hearing now that sometime at the end of summer, beginning of fall, FMCSA is going to put out the next step of the rulemaking process and move closer to a potential mandate. So in the meantime, we are working with the legislative branch and Congress to make sure that FMCSA cannot move forward with any speed limiter mandate. And a couple weeks ago, Oklahoma Congressman Josh Burkeen introduced the Deregulating Restrictions on Interstate Vehicles and 18-Wheelers Act, the DRIVE Act. It's bill number HR 3039, HR 3039, that would prohibit FMCSA from promulgating any rule or regulation to mandate speed limiters. And the reasons we are opposed to the speed limiter mandate, number one, highway safety. The speed differentials this would create between commercial motor vehicles and other vehicles on the road is going to create more interactions, more crashes between vehicles that could have, in some states, as many as 15, 20 miles an hour difference between the posted speed limit and the top speed limit that trucks would be allowed to go under any mandate. Then you take a look at supply chain efficiencies. Slowing down trucks is going to create a lot more congestion and backups. You're going to have more trucks on the road, longer delivery times, less pay, less efficiency for drivers on the road. We think it's going to create more trucks on the road, more emissions as well. Really
Yep.
taking control out of a driver's hands with the speed limiting devices. So we know there's a number of problems involved with a speed limiter mandate, and not to mention, kind of Congress and the legal system has come
Right.
to this conclusion where states should have the ability to set speed
Right.
limits in their own geography, in their own states. They know what's a safe speed to operate on. To have the federal government, DOT, and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration come in and kind of overrule that really creates some major concerns in our mind. So this
Absolutely.
legislation would come in and halt any rulemaking from FMCSA, and we've already seen quite a bit of support for this bill, and we're going to continue that effort as kind of FMCSA waits to come out. Sounds like is going to be the next step on the regulatory side to mandate these really harmful and dangerous devices.
Well, certainly this will end up in some kind of court, eventually the Supreme Court, and we've seen that the Supreme Court very much is taking the side of states' rights over the side of federal government in just about everything. So you have to think, even if they get this through, that it wouldn't last.
Well, that's legal. Legal action is always an option, and we do see it quite a bit when it comes to various regulations. And just within the last couple of years, we've seen some major cases at the Supreme Court that really are perhaps putting some more checks and balances on some of this regulatory overreach. But we're hoping, and really through this legislation, to stop FMCSA at the pass before they can advance and finalize any rulemaking, long before it would ever get to the legal side of things. So that's really our focus right now with this bill introduced by Congressman Burkeen. And also we're still trying to get similar legislation introduced on the Senate side. But when you look at all the comments that were filed last year, I think we're finally starting to see some of the voices that we've heard we've heard for decades, and when you talk to drivers, this is, again, I mentioned truck parking was a top concern. Speed limiters is right up there as well. But
Sure.
a lot of these lawmakers aren't familiar, aren't up to date with what FMCSA has proposed. This legislation is going to open up a lot of their eyes, and we think is really, really going to only increase support for the legislation and really increase opposition against any speed limiter mandate, which we think would again have devastating impact on highway safety.
Well, it's good it's creating awareness. It
Yes.
seems like, teachers have to go for in-services and other people do. Maybe Congress needs to take an in-service on various industries so they have an idea of what they're going to be dealing with and the whys and why nots.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And that's why it's so important. If drivers do have the time to contact their lawmakers about different trucking issues. And, we try and make it a little easier for drivers with our website, www.fightingfortruckers.com. And any driver can go to that site. We've got a segment up there right now, really calling for support for HR 3039, and with just a click of a button, drivers can send a letter to their lawmaker asking for their support on this issue in opposing speed limiters. So if you haven't done so already and are listening now, visit fightingfortruckers.com and you can find out how to make your voices heard in Congress. Because as you mentioned, a lot of these lawmakers aren't familiar with many of these trucking regulations and trucking policies that are really do have a major impact on their daily lives.
Well, I think that they hear the word speed limiter and they think, oh, that sounds like a great idea,
Right.
not knowing that that causes more problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it might sound good on paper, but when you really look at the data and the science behind it, it's going to have the opposite effect. And then when you hear from drivers who have been on the road for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, have driven safely in the millions of miles with no accidents behind their belt, and you talk to them, and they don't want a speed limiter. They've never had a need for a speed limiter, especially for the independent drivers and the owner operators. Uh, it's just another hassle for them. Again, taking control out of their hands, and
Yep.
that's what this mandate would do. And we're not saying you can't have them. If you want them, we see a lot of fleets use the devices. They have their reasons for that, but in no way should this be a mandate for every truck on the road.
Sure. Well, it certainly does seem, and I think it's true, the trucking industry is probably the most heavily regulated of any industry.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Just take a look at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulation book. I've got one sitting on my desk here. It's a few inches thick.
Is
All
it
the
better than
rules.
War and Peace?
It's comparable and probably harder and more difficult to read when you look at all the different red tape that the drivers and the motor carriers have to abide by. And we understand the reasoning for most of that, and certainly highway safety is at top of mind for the small business truckers out there who are depend on operating safely to stay in business. But to have some of these regulations and red tape mandated that has no positive impact on highway safety just doesn't make sense.
Sure. Well, it's kind of a case of a bureaucrat just saying, hey, that's mine. Can you see it? It's right there.
Mhm.
Part A, Part B, Part D. You
Yep,
know,
no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
we do have to go to break here, Jay. There's some more things we want to unpack before the top of the hour. We're talking with Jay Grimes. He's the head of regulatory affairs at OOIDA. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up. The Truckers Network helps professional drivers save money and makes their lives easier. We were created for drivers by a commercial driver. We know the industry and driver needs. A Truckers Network membership offers exclusive discounts through our trusted partners on things like truck care, truck parking, tires, oil changes, fuel additives, fitness, roadside assistance, first aid kits, driver training, and a whole lot more. Start saving today. Check us out at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. That's app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and we're talking with Jay Grimes. He's the head of regulatory affairs at OOIDA. We've been talking about some of the trucking regulations and what the process is in Capitol Hill. Tom, you said you had another question for Jay.
Jay, I get very excited when I see Republicans and Democrats get together and agree on something. Usually they can't agree on whether or not it's raining outside, but every so often they agree on something, and they've actually made a little headway on one of these EPA rulings, got something all put together, and now it looks like the president's going to veto it. Can you tell us what is this about and what's going on here?
Yeah, and we do need to clarify which of these latest emissions regulations we're talking about, because there have been quite a few, not only on the EPA side, but California and CARB as well.
Right,
And
right.
this one specifically relates to an EPA rule that was proposed and finalized very quickly last year, relating to nitrous oxide emissions for commercial trucks. And the proposal put in some, I think, overly stringent NOx emission standards beginning for new trucks starting in model year 2027. And when you look at some of the emissions equipment that would have to go onto these trucks, and we've seen this from previous EPA rulemakings, It adds costs to the new vehicles. It takes away from some of the vehicle reliability. Again, it takes away the ability of owner operators and drivers to perform their own maintenance on their vehicles, and really it creates a whole lot of costs for drivers. It creates a whole lot of uncertainty. And from our perspective, what we've heard from our drivers, and instead of being able to purchase some of these newer vehicles, they're going to be forced to hang on to some of their older, more reliable trucks, and not going to be able to create some more fleet turnover, which would help overall emissions. So we made some recommendations to EPA last year on how they can improve the rule, really having a more practical timeline to make sure that some of these new vehicles are ready and reliable when they come off the line. EPA decided to keep the kind of rushed manufacturing timeline in the final rule. So we kind of went to Congress, and they've got this ability through the Congressional Review Act to overturn some of these questionable regulations. And
Thank
that's what
goodness for that.
yeah. And that's what they've done. About a month ago, the Senate overturned the rule by a 50-49 vote. Tom, you mentioned the bipartisan effort with that. That was both Republicans and Democrats voting there. And then yesterday, the House of Representatives followed suit, enacting that Congressional Review Act, overturning the EPA NOx emissions rule. The kind of the wheels of the federal government kind of keep moving along, and now the legislation moves to the president's desk, where he does have the option to veto. By all accounts, the administration has stated they will veto, and they have 10 days to do so. So we are expecting that the administration will veto the congressional action and will maintain the rule in place. Congress, will have an opportunity to override the veto. And this, to overturn the veto, they would need 2/3 majority of the vote, which, based on the numbers so far, they would not have the votes to overturn the veto. But I think it does call to the attention to some of the problems involved with this EPA regulation, and hopes that attention can restrict some of the EPA, some other EPA proposals that they have kind of moving through the rulemaking process right now. So it's kind of a good news, bad news situation, but we'll kind of wait to see what the administration does. They do kind of wait to that next step on the presidential veto for this NOx emissions rule.
It does seem like the EPA is regulations on steroids. I mean, some of the stuff that keeps coming out of there, I'm like, wow, that sounds so extreme.
Yeah, I think we've used the term regulatory blitz, regulatory onslaught. So we talked about the NOx emissions rule that came out last year and was finalized, and now we've got a latest proposal called the GHG, greenhouse gas emissions phase 3 proposal, which is going to set some more strict emissions beginning mostly in model year 2028. Again, another hurried timeline. And there's also a whole bunch of provisions in there that are going to incentivize, in a lot of ways, mandate the production of all electric zero emission vehicles, which really we have a lot of concerns about right now for the long haul trucking sector, where a lot of the charging infrastructure, the equipment is not at all in place, or even remotely close to being available by the time model year 2028 comes around.
Sure.
It occurs to me, Jay, maybe what needs to happen in the midst of all of this is legislation needs to be put forward that says you cannot build something that is quote unquote zero emissions unless you can demonstrate that in the process of creating such a vehicle, you did so with zero emissions.
Yeah, that's another factor. there's kind of some of these proposals out there that these electric vehicles are kind of a silver bullet to reduce the overall emissions and greenhouse gas impact. But when you look at some of the way these things are manufactured and some of the countries where they're manufactured, it's just really not that quite as simple.
No,
And
not
that's
at all. Yeah.
another concern that we have. And when you talk about the battery weights and the equipment, and not to mention the price tag of the electric vehicles, and I can't even the electric trucks too. It really makes it tough for the fleets and the drivers to purchase some of these vehicles, when, if and when they're ever really available and ever really zero emissions.
Sure. Where do people reach out to OOIDA, Jay?
Well, you can visit us at www.oida.com. Got a whole host of information there. Fightingfortruckers.com as well on the government affairs side of things. And we're also very active on Facebook, Twitter. And can find us there as well. So encourage anyone listening to visit some of those resources and make your voices heard in Washington for sure.
There's power in numbers, and you
Yes.
guys work super hard to get the congressmen and congresswomen to listen. This is a good thing.
Yes, to really have more practical and common sense trucking policies and trucking regulations to help small businesses and to help and improve highway safety.
Common sense in Congress. Now, those are some concepts there. But if anybody can do it, you guys can.
We're trying.
I appreciate you being on the show, Jay. You're always a wealth of information, and you keep our listeners informed on what the heck is happening on Capitol Hill and what they need to expect. This is so very important.
Well, thank you for getting the word out and the opportunity.
Absolutely. You've been listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. With Shelley Johnson and Tom Kelly, we've been talking with Jay Grimes of OOIDA. Stay tuned for more great programming coming up right here on TNCRadio.live. We've got great primetime entertainment, so stay tuned. Thank you for listening to another great interview on TNCRadio.live and the Truckers Network radio show. All of the material you hear on TNCRadio.live on our website, our broadcasts, or our podcasts are copyrighted. There can be no distribution without the express consent of TNCRadio.live and its partners. For inquiries, write us at info@tncradio.live. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast of the Truckers Network radio show.